You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
This is Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the big show. For over 16 years and 2300 episodes, we've been the Chris Voss Show, and always the smartest people, the greatest guests, the people who share their journeys, their stories, their lessons of life, their cathartic moments, things that they've learned that can make your life better. If it doesn't work, then go listen to the episode again, because you clearly missed it. Because I learn from every guest we have on the show, and I'm always just amazed at some of the different paradigms or ways of looking at things I can learn from. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today we have an amazing young man on the show with us. We're going to be talking about his book, and it came out August 29th, 2023. It is called The Prayer of Freedom: God's Breakthrough Approach to Prayer that Frees You from Many Forms of Chronic Pain, Chronic Health Issues, Anxiety, Addictions, and Other Life Challenges. Beatty Carmichael joins us on the show. We're going to be talking about his insights, his experience, and some of the things that he does, and everything you can learn from him as well. Welcome to the show, Beatty. How are you?
I am doing terrific. How are you doing, Chris?
I am doing excellent. Give us .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, the best place, especially as it relates to the book. So we're going to be talking about some of the things I've studied that I've put in and encapsulated in my book called The Prayer of Freedom. And the best place to go is going to be the prayerfreedombook.com. Takes you right to the website that's tied to that. So the prayerfreedombook.com.
So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside?
What's inside, 30,000-foot overview, best way to describe it is a short story of where I am. I teach at an addiction recovery center here in Birmingham. It's the largest one in America. We house over 500 residents.
Wow.
And these people, if you know anyone about that have gone through addictions, they deal with all kinds of addictions, mental illnesses, bipolar disorder, depression, all types of chronic pain. And I've developed a systematic approach to prayer that's based off of some of the things in the Bible, that for every 20 students who come into my class and they follow this simple approach, nearly 18 of them leave my class completely free of addictions and of pain, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, all kinds of things like that. And if they've been on medication for their mental illnesses, they're usually getting off of those medications as well. So that's basically what the book is about, is how that works. And what we're going to be talking about is kind of the high level of what's going on with all of that.
So you've learned a lot working. How many years have you been working in that field?
It's been about 8.5 years now.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's a lot of things that go on with people with addiction and people that go into rehab, lots of childhood trauma, lots of different issues that way, and not resolving those sort of things. So tell us, can you tease out a little bit in the book as to
Sure.
how this power works and how do you utilize it?
Yeah, so real simply, and I'll get on some Bible things, but this isn't religious. This is what's really cool with this is it doesn't matter if you're a Hindu or Muslim or Jew or Christian or an atheist or whatever. The process works. But what I've done is I've used a lot of the stuff in the Bible to guide me in this process because it seems to be more accurate when it comes to spiritual laws. So the simple process is this, Chris. A lot of times we do things that we shouldn't do. It's what God will say is, don't do that. And we do it anyway. And then somewhere down the road, we have things that happen in our lives that are uncomfortable. If you look at the Hindu version of karma, you see the same pattern. Do bad things will happen. And what I've done is looking at some of the spiritual laws that the Bible talks about, I found that if we simply say in a very strategic approach, I'm sorry to this God of the universe, whatever you call him, whatever name you give him when you talk to him, when we just say, I'm sorry for specific things, then he will free us from these other issues. And it's basically that simple. Now, there's more complexity, but that's generally how it works.
Huh. And you've had people, chronic pain and chronic issues.
Yeah.
I see on your website you've got some testimonials from some people and stuff like that. Tell us about some of that.
Yes, I remember my wife and I were out at Walmart, and we stopped and prayed for this homeless couple there. And we started asking him, how can we help you? And he said, we just got an apartment the government's giving us, and we're trying to put some things together for that. So come on in, we'll buy you some things. So we took him into the store to start getting them set up for the apartment. And there was a book stand there on just some spiritual growth books. So we got a book. This couple is named Brandon and Lanita. And as we were walking through the hallway, one of the aisles there, I was teasing Brandon and saying, you're going to have to steal the book from Lanita if you're going to read it. And she says, oh, no, Brandon will read it to me because I can't read. And I said, oh, I'm sorry about that. Did you never learn to read? She said, no, I know how to read, but my eyes are too blurry to read.
Oh, wow.
And so I gave her the book and said, show me what you mean. So she opens up the book, and it's about the same size print as my book here. And she takes that book and she pulls it up until it's about 3 inches from her eyes, and she could barely read it step by step.
Wow.
So why are you doing that? She said, because it's too blurry. And so I know God doesn't want you to have blurry eyes. May I pray with you and for you? She said yes. And as I was about to pray, I asked her, so one of the things that we do that God doesn't like is we hold unforgiveness towards someone. So I asked her, do you have unforgiveness in your heart towards anyone? She said, yes, my ex-boyfriend. She said he grabbed me by the back of my hair and slammed me over and over and over again into the corner and the edge of the dresser and busted all my teeth. And she showed me she had no teeth, top or bottom.
Wow.
So this was traumatic.
Yeah.
And I said, would you be willing to forgive her? And she said, yes. So I just led her in a short prayer of forgiveness, which is, I forgive so-and-so for all the hurt that he did against me. And then I said, God, I ask that you would now open her eyes and restore her eyesight. And literally, this is less than 1 minute. And I said, tell me how they are. She said, I can see all the way to the end of Walmart. I said, what about the book? So I held the book up about 4 feet away from her, and she could read it as clear as 20/20 vision. She started reading it better. And so I've seen things like this. Unforgiveness is a big thing. I've seen just simply from unforgiveness, I've seen blinded eyes open, rheumatoid arthritis disappear. I've seen all kinds of chronic pain just melt away and go. And then with other things, I've seen glaucoma disappear and cataracts. I've seen broken bones not broken bones, men, but right after surgery, when you're really sore, especially this was an orthopedic surgery that happened, and the guy had to break the bones and put everything back together. And simply by leading this lady through this prayer process, all that was healed, and she had full range of motion immediately from her arms. It's miraculous, essentially.
Huh. That's very interesting. Tell us about your upbringing and what influenced you and how you, I guess, got into prayer.
Yeah. My upbringing was interesting. Believe it or not, I'm actually born into a line of 7 generations of medical doctors.
Wow.
So 7 generations ago, all the way down the line. So a couple hundred years. And I never went into medicine. I actually went into business. I have a small business called Agent Dominator, and we help real estate agents get listings, and generate listings. So I had nothing to do with medicine or healing. But 9 years ago, something caught my eye. It was a video I was watching. It was a docuseries on Netflix at the time. And it was just some guy going around with a camera and videoing people out in public as they would pray for someone for healing, and God would heal them. And I was astounded by this. And have you ever seen anything, Chris, where something happened to you, you were something engaged with you, and it just really gripped your heart, and you just needed more of it? You wanted to pursue it, something that was just really powerful to you. Does that make sense?
Coffee, yeah.
Coffee, yeah, okay. So for me, this was like coffee for you, right? It was like something rang true in my heart, And looking back, I can see, a lot of times we see these patterns. You see, like in one line, you'll see a military line, you have a general and a general and a general and a colonel and a colonel, okay? And for my line, it was healing. And my generations past were healing through medicine. As I started to see this and pursue it, I realized that that healing mantle, I guess, was still on me, but it started to focus on healing through prayer. And so I started to study that direction, go that direction, and over the years have perfected out the process that anyone can pray through. As I've tested this at the Addiction Recovery Center, which is a great place to test, I see about 87% success rate as people go through this process, that everything they put on their list, I have them make a list. I'll just show you for our video listeners and watchers. I have them make a list of everything that they're going through. So this is a handwritten list from one of the ladies there. Everything's a 10. And for our audio listeners, it's just things like bipolar 1 and 2, depression, anxiety, voices in her head, arthritis, COPD, neuropathy, addiction to drugs and cigarettes and pornography and things of that sort. So when they make this list and they go through this process, 87% of these people who go through this process see all of that disappear out of their lives. So that's what got me there, is I just started to see videos, docuseries of God healing today that my church, I grew up in a very legalistic church, and they never talked about anything like this. So I wasn't accustomed to it, and it just really gripped me. I wanted it, and I started pursuing it, and here we are today.
And on your website, there's several different things that people have said has worked for them.
Yeah.
And chronic pain, relationship conflicts, pain, misery. A lot of people hold inside of the body, what's the old adage, the body holds the score. And a lot of people hold inside the body pain, they hold issues, they hold trauma, the scarring that they have. And usually, a lot of times it's stressed or held in the body sometimes creates pain and different things like that. So I can see how sometimes this might work for people and, get them to work there. What is some other advice you give to people on how they can deal with their issues?
So what's interesting is you bring up a really good thing, that the body holds a lot of this. I was just on a vacation trip recently with a friend, and she's getting her master's in, I guess, psychotherapy, but helping people through counseling, through trauma, things of that sort. And one of the things that scientists have found is there are a lot of things that happen in our body that our body holds on to trauma, holds on to memories, and then it actually starts to attack us from those things. Those things start to degrade us, like unforgiveness. I'll answer your question, but I want to talk on this real quickly. If you have unforgiveness, it puts you in a fight or flight scenario. So it's a high stress, and it's now your body is in this high stress mode all the time, and you can document through that stress increased cortisol levels, which starts to decrease your immune system. So now you start to get sick all the time and chronic pain. It reduces your serotonin and your dopamine production. So now you start to feel depressed all the time. It starts to gain weight, makes you want to eat more. In a fight or flight, you need the energy to fight. So you start to eat more sugary foods and carbohydrates. And so now you start to get fat in the belly. It's called visceral fat. And then that increases your risk of diabetes and increases risk of organ failure. So scientifically, you can show how these stressors in our life actually play a part in the body.
Yeah.
But the advice I would give people is, while those scientific approaches are true, it's almost as if our bodies, we're spiritual beings in a physical body, is basically, most people believe that there's some God up there, maybe. And we see evidence that things aren't just by chance. And so what happens is we start to realize that there's something spiritual and maybe supernatural outside of just us. And my best advice for people is to recognize that there is a God out there, and these things do have impact in our lives. We see this through ancient religions for years, where ancient religions would always sacrifice an animal to a God up there, and then they would offer contrition. I'm sorry for these things that I've done. and then they would ask for favor in battle or favor in harvest. So we see the pattern, and these patterns have been for ages. We always seek God. But in the Western world, a lot of times we stop seeking God. So my greatest advice is there's actually a God out there, and I have proven scientifically that by going through a proper approach in prayer, that these things will not only melt away, but leave like within a day. I've seen things happen so quickly that it defies anything but what we would call miracle, only because we can't define it scientifically.
The mind is a powerful thing. It can overcome
Very powerful.
some interesting things. And it's wild. What do you hope people take from your book and the lessons on your website?
Main thing is there are a lot of people out there that are struggling. They're dealing with some sort of chronic pain, and they've dealt with it for years. It could be something from a natural cause, like a friend of mine he was in football in college 35 years ago. He damaged his hip. I think he broke it, and it's given him pain ever since. At the time I was talking to him just a couple of years ago, he was walking with a crutch for several years because it was so bad. For him, it was simply a physical occurrence that happened years back that never healed.
Wow.
For me, I realized there's something more to it. And I started asking him questions, and this is what I would ask for people to take away. He didn't think there was anything different, anything unusual about it. It was just something that happened to him. But I started asking him questions of things that maybe he did up to that point that could have been things that God would not have liked. And I found one set of things. He was promiscuous in high school, and God doesn't like fornication, which is what that would be called. And I wasn't condemning of him. I was just saying, hey, that could be the cause. And I don't know, but it's simple enough to test it out. Would you let me guide you in a short prayer and say, I'm sorry to God for that, and see what happens? And he said, sure. So I led him in a short prayer, had him ask God that he's sorry for doing that. In the Bible terms, it's called repent. I repent for sleeping with these different girls. And then we asked God to heal his hip, take away the pain. And before we did that, he stood up, and I had him measure, and the pain level was a 7. So I'm on the phone with him, and I said, stand back up. His name is Bud. Stand back up, Bud, and tell me what you feel. And he stands up, and the phone goes quiet. I said, Bud, are you there? And there's nothing. It's like the phone was dead. I actually looked at my phone to see if I'm still connected. I was. And then I started to hear him whimper. And I got a great big grin on my face because I knew what was going on. Something dramatic had just happened. And so after he regained his composure, it was about 2-3 minutes, he got back on the phone. He's crying. He says, Beatty, all the pain is gone. I'm out of pain. And for 35 years, he thought it was simply because of his accident, which it was. But I find that a lot of these things that we deal with, whether it's chronic pain, whether it's anxiety, panic attacks, whether it's something, chronic sickness that we have to take care of, or even ongoing relationship failures. You're dating this person and something happens and it breaks up. You date someone else, something happens, it breaks up, and it's just one after another. Anytime you see a pattern that's persistent, I find that there's usually some sort of a spiritual root. And if you'll be willing to entertain the idea that maybe there's something else there, a spiritual root that could be at the source of this, then the takeaway is, if you go through the process in the Prayer Freedom book, then you have an 87% chance of getting completely rid of it. And the things that I've seen from people that are totally unexpecting, they don't have any clue, they don't even believe this thing works because it makes no sense. And all I can tell you is empirical data. I've seen over 700 people get free of things like pain and mental suffering issues. I've seen them get free of just things where things in their body doesn't work. I've seen recovery from some little strokes and things of that sort. I've seen people get rid of diabetes type 2 and sleep apnea. I've seen some things that are just defies medical science. that, and having grown up in a medical family, I'll go back to Dad and say, Dad, this lady just prayed and her RSD disappeared. I had no idea what RSD was. I go to him, he goes, that happened. That's a miracle because RSD just doesn't disappear. It's incurable. So that's what I really suggest with people as a takeaway is just remember there are a lot of things out there that we don't understand. And if we don't understand it, don't reject it, pursue it. And if you're desperate enough to get free, or you have a loved one that's desperate enough to get free, then try it out. It works.
Yeah, definitely. What do you say to somebody, maybe if they've been praying over the health issues they have? And so it's not working. So
yeah.
Is there a right way you have to do it?
Yeah, perfect example. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a podcast with this show, and this was actually a religious show that I was on. And this person, his name is his name is Josh. Different. So Josh was suffering from really bad pain in his back and his hips and his knees. And he had been praying for years that God would take it away, and it never did. So he just gave up on praying. Wow. He's had this pain for over 10 years. And I led him through this simple process while we're on the podcast show. And in 5 minutes or less, all of the pain was completely gone. See, what happens is, think about this. Let's say that you were caught speeding, excessive speed, 120 miles an hour in a 40 mile an hour zone. So now they're wanting to put you in jail. They want to do all this stuff, and you want to get out of it. Mm-hmm. You as yourself, you go to court. You don't know anyone there. You have an attorney, maybe. You're not getting out of that sucker. Mm-hmm. But imagine for a moment that your best friend is the senior judge, and you go to your friend and say, hey, I had an emergency. My daughter was in a car accident. I was getting there as fast as I could. She was critical condition, whatever the thing is. Can you take care of this ticket for me? And your judge can make a check mark, write a little note, and now the ticket's completely off your record. In other words, while we can approach through our own version of prayer, the only channels we know to go through to pray for things in our lives, just because nothing happens doesn't mean nothing can happen or is going to happen. What I found, and this is the big key, Chris, I found that there's a process. Technically, in the Bible, there's a passage called James 5:16. And it's a passage where it's talking about if you're getting sick and how do you get healed. And it makes a very simple comment. It says, confess your sins and you shall be healed. And as I started to research the spiritual laws behind all kinds of sickness, and I use the Bible because it has proven the most consistent in being accurate. In other words, I'll research something in the Bible, and then as a scientist, I'll go out and attest it and see if that process works. And this is how I've done this for 8.5 years now, is I test and I track, and I test and I track. And what I find in the Bible is a spiritual law, very similar to karma, that when you do things against what God says to do, then sickness and disasters will start to happen in your life, depending on the severity of those things that you do. And the way that you reverse those things happening in your life is you go back and say, I'm sorry for that. And that's what James 5:16 says. It says, confess your sins, basically saying, I'm sorry. And then you ask God to release whatever's going on, and it happens. And so even if someone's been praying for years, just that guy on the podcast, or another guy I met in Walmart, his eye, he lost 80% of the vision in his eye after a stroke. And I asked if I could pray with him. He said, I just came back from a prayer meeting. He said, I'm a pastor at a church. We've been praying for this and nothing's happening. I said, that's okay. I usually see different results. Can I pray with you on it? And in just a few minutes, he'd regained almost all the eyesight in his eye. Wow. So it's not just the fact that you pray. It's the question is, are you praying in accordance to the laws that make it work? Let me see if this makes sense, Chris. And this is for your video watchers. This will make sense. I'll show you visually, and then I'll explain to the others what I'm doing. So right now, I'm holding up a pen. And if I were to let go of the pen, it's going to drop. And every time I hold my pen up and let go of it, it drops. And Chris, if you were to grab your pen, hold it up just like this and let go of it and it drops, then we could conclude there is some law that we can't see, we'll call it gravity, that causes your pen to drop. So now we can say there is a physical law, and as long as we abide by that law, we can see a consistent outcome. What I've seen in prayer is the same thing. By taking a certain formula in prayer, I know it sounds crazy, but there's some reasoning behind it. But by taking a certain formula in prayer and going through that same formula, I see the same thing happen. I see people with different issues going on in their life, and I have them go through this formula of prayer of basically saying, Lord, I am sorry for what I did. Now will you heal me? And I see the consistent result of when we do that, we get healings. The key is to strategically do it. In other words, like if your car stops running on the road, the first thing you do is you check, do I have any fuel? If there's fuel, you keep going down this list until you find that thing strategically that's causing it to stop. A lot of times it's just fuel, so you put it in. Yeah. But if your car doesn't crank on a cold morning, it doesn't mean that you have no fuel. It's likely something else. So everything we go through, there's usually some spiritual root, and it's that spiritual root that is the key. And that's why if someone's been praying for years to get free, then chances are what I've been finding is you just haven't prayed the right way on the right issue, because it's a cause and effect in most cases.
This has been very insightful. Give people your final pitch out as we go out. Tell them where they can onboard with you, reach out to you, questions, order the book, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Let me do that. Let me ask you a question, though. Do you have any pain or anxiety or depression or anything that you can feel and measure that I could just send you through a little role play? And if you don't want to do this, I'm cool with that.
I'd really rather not do it on the show. We don't psychoanalyze Chris Voss on the show.
No worries.
No problem. Not a problem.
Let me, can I lead the people that are listening into just a short process of how this works,
sure,
and then how to get my book, okay?
Sure.
So here's the basic idea. It's a 3-step approach. And so for anyone listening to the show, I want you to assess, do you have anything that you're dealing with right now that you can measure? Intensity, a pain level, an anxiety, a depression, glaucoma, you can't see through an eye, or an arm isn't moving, or anything like that. And if so, here is 3 simple steps, okay? Number 1, you ask God to reveal anything that you might have done that could be tied to it. Number 2, we're going to tell God, I'm sorry for doing that, whatever he brings to mind. And number 3, we're then going to ask God to remove it, and we're going to use his authority to tell it to leave. Okay? So here's how it would go in sort of a real life scenario. So if you're listening out there, here's what you would do. Say, God, and it doesn't matter which God, right? You can call it God by any name that you want, even if you're atheist. Okay? If you're up there and I don't believe you're there, but I'm going to test you on this. And you simply say, God, I want to get rid of this back pain, and it's hurting a lot. And if there's any sin I need to repent of, or anyone I need to forgive, would you bring it to my mind now? And then whatever comes to your mind, then simply act on it. And if it's something you did that you shouldn't have done, just say, I repent of doing blank. If it's someone you need to forgive, just simply say, I forgive blank. That's it. It's as simple as that. And then you ask God to remove it. And sometimes you'll start to feel it going down immediately. Other times, usually by the end of the day, you'll feel it disappear. But that's a simple approach. But the bigger approach is what's in my book, and it's called the Prayer of Freedom. And you simply go to the link, theprayerfreedombook.com, theprayerfreedombook.com. And the reason I give you the link is if you type in the Prayer of Freedom on Google or Yahoo or on Amazon, there's so many things on prayer and freedom that you'll lose the book in the shuffle. So just go to theprayerfreedombook.com. And what the book is, the first half of it walks you through step by step what these spiritual laws are that I've uncovered, and the references of where these are found in some of these religious texts. Then the second half of the book It is a step-by-step work guide, a worksheet that guides you through the process. This is what I take the people at the Addiction Recovery Center through. And they use it as a textbook. I literally give them the book, I guide them through it, and they do all the work themselves and the prayer portion themselves. And 87% of the people see literally everything in their life start to melt away by the end of the process. And the other thing I like to do, this for my tongue-in-cheek, as a marketer, it's money back guaranteed, right? Because you can go to Amazon and buy it, and you can return it in 30 days if you don't like it. So it'll cost you nothing if it doesn't work. But if it does work, then it's worth everything you can pay for it. So if you're struggling with some sort of issue in your life, if you have a loved one who's struggling with any sort of issues, and you're wanting to get free, then let me encourage you to get the prayerfreedombook.com and go through the process.
That's a great pitch, man. You nailed it. As we go out, give people the .coms one more time, and we'll wrap up the show.
Yeah. So it's the prayerfreedombook.com. That's all you have to remember is the prayerfreedombook.com, and that's how you get it.
Thank you very much for coming to the show. We really appreciate it, Beatty.
Yeah. And thank you, Chris. I sure enjoyed it.
Thank you. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. The Prayer of Freedom, God's breakthrough approach to prayer that frees you from many forms of chronic pain, chronic health issues, anxiety, addictions, and other life challenges. Thanks for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that should have us out.